There are several stories, first of which was told on Sunday, but which was left incomplete. Let's see what it does for us energetically when that completion is made. There was that story about a rather controversial Zen master who took 3 of his students and led them to the red light district, where he introduced them to the madam, paid her, and instructed the young beings that they were not to return to the monastery until they heard the 3 bells which called them to meditation in the morning. So in the morning, when the 3 beings confronted their Zen master, the Zen master asked them what had happened. And the first one said, well, I saw and experienced that my disciplines, my resolve, and my purpose were greater than my desires. So I made the young woman sleep on the floor. Turning to the second student said, well, I resolved that I was not going to look at the world and women objectively, and I tried unsuccessfully 5.5 times. Then he turned to the third student, and the third student said, well, I resolved that I would be completely open, even my heart. So we talked, and we made love, and we talked, and we made love, and we talked, and we made love. And then we nested together like 2 spoons and slept blissfully. And then the master asked, well, what was it that arose for you out of this? And the third student said, I realized how lonely I had been, and now I have second thoughts about my purpose in seeking enlightenment and to become an enlightened monk. And then in chorus, the 3 young beings asked, Master, what should we have learned from this? And the master said, no shoulds and no teaching, only experience. The second story is that story about the very young being, only 7 years old. His name was Krishna, and he'd been born to his parents in their dotage when they were old. But he was a most devoted son. Every day he would go to the marketplace and ensure that with the little that they had, that there was food provided for these elderly parents. But one day, Krishna was walking in the marketplace when along the road came what is known as those town criers. At the behest of the king, broadcasting what it was needed to be told to the population. And this town crier was crying, who will sacrifice their young son to save the kingdom? Now, of course, parents, particularly mothers, gathered their young boys under their skirts and hid them in doorways, going indoors. But then Krishna himself stepped out in front of the crier and said, "I will sacrifice myself for the sake of the kingdom." The crier said, "Should you not seek permission from your parents to do so?" And Krishna, being the very wise young being that he was, answered, "I have had many mothers and fathers in many other lifetimes, and I know that my parents will be taken care of. I offer myself as the sacrifice." But then Krishna said to the crier, "Please, won't you tell me why it is that this sacrifice is needed?" So the crier descended from his horse, and taking Krishna's hand, he took him to a nearby tree where they sat under its shade. And the crier said to Krishna, "Well, you know that our king is young and virile. He is also fair and rules well his prosperous kingdom. And you also know that to assuage his loneliness, our young king loved to hunt, to go out into the forest to hunt deer and wild boar and lions and so forth. And it has been told that just a few days ago he went out into the forest, and chasing a deer on his stallion, he was separated from his entourage and found himself lost in the deep forest. But then he became tired and thirsty, and the deer had disappeared. So he descended from his horse, taking it to a stream that he had found, to assuage his own thirst and that of his horse. But while he was drinking, he looked down the stream, and there was the most beautiful maiden he had ever seen bathing in the stream, and he fell instantly in love. So he took it upon himself, when she left the stream and was garbed, to follow her. And when he did, he found himself in a clearing and discovered that she was the daughter of an old hermit sage who had taken up residence in the forest with some of his followers. So the king, being the king and brave, he went up to the sage and asked for his daughter's hand in marriage. And the old sage said, "Yes, you may have her hand if she agrees to marry you." And of course the maiden had seen the king and also become besotted with this handsome being. But the sage said, "Also, you may only have her hand if you resolve to stop hunting the forest animals, stop killing the deer and the boar and the birds." And this, of course, the king readily agreed to do. So that very day, the marriage took place. But the king wanted to be on his way back to his kingdom. So with his new wife, they set out in the evening times, but of course it was soon getting dark. So they found a great tree by the stream out of which they'd drunk, and under that tree they consummated their marriage and slept peacefully and blissfully. But in the morning, when the king awoke, he found a great darkness had enveloped them. And when he looked closely, he saw in that darkness the face of a great demon, bloody fangs dripping, menacing, malevolent, and then it spoke. How dare you come to my realm without asking my permission, nor giving due reverence and ritual? For this you must be punished, and unless you can bring to sacrifice a young boy within 7 days, I will ensure not only that you have no chance to live peacefully with your new wife, but I will destroy your kingdom. So, finishing the story, the town crier completed the explanation of why this sacrifice had to be made. So giving instructions to Krishna, one of them being that his mother and father should be in attendance at the ritual sacrifice, Krishna went back to his parents and told them. Of course, they wept and wailed. What will become of us? They cried. Krishna, with his wisdom, his ageless wisdom, explained to them that they would be taken care of. And so the day came when the king and his entourage came, taking Krishna and his parents, going deep into the forest to the place where the sacrifice was to be made, under the tree. And an altar was set up, and Krishna was laid on the altar. His father was instructed to stand at his head, his mother at his feet. And the king himself prepared himself for what it was that he knew instinctively would happen. And then, of course, the darkness descended, and the demon was able to be seen. And the demon instructed the king to raise his sword above the altar to pierce the heart of Krishna as this sacrifice. So standing beside that ritual altar, the king stood with his sword raised above his head, waiting for the moment of instruction from the demon to plunge it into Krishna's heart. But just in that brief moment, like the moment between breaths, Krishna began to laugh. And his laughter rang out into the forest, into the trees, and the trees began to wave in laughter, and the grass began to wave in laughter. The birds trilled in laughter. The demon roared, "Why are you laughing?" And Krishna replied, "When problems descend for us, the first that we go to are our mother and father. And here I am on this altar of sacrifice with my father at my head and my mother at my feet. And when we are unable to solve our problems with our parents, we turn to the highest authority, the king. And here I am with the king, with his sword, awaiting to bring about that sacrifice. If I am unable to turn to my parents or the king, then to whom should I turn? So again, this story is left incomplete for us. And the question is posed to us: how would you complete this story? What happened? Did the sword descend? What's your experience in life where we've been placed in a situation where we have nothing to turn to? What happened? Where are we now? How would you complete this story? What's your experience? Did the sword descend and that offering of sacrifice be made? What happened? What is the end of this story? For you,